Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and much to a lot of my colleagues' chagrin, this might be the last time I get to speak on this bill.
Are you asking
disappointed?
Consent?
Mr. Chairman, I reserve a point of order.
Let me just start by saying...
Wait. You asked to speak, and they said this will be the last time you'll speak, and then the gentlelady reserved a point of order.
Against my speech.
No
amendment.
Do you have an amendment?
I have amendment. Shimkus 020.
Without objection, that amendment will be considered.
I was trying to trap her.
Yeah, that amendment will be considered as read. A point of order will be reserved by the gentlelady from Colorado. And I recognize the gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief. We've learned a lot in this markup. My colleague, Mr. Boyer, raised the issue about the least affected by this bill are actually some of the major authors of this bill. In fact, the Evansville Courier states that since Indiana has 94% coal production, they will be harmed. Illinois, 47.6%, they will be harmed. Kentucky, 93%, they will be harmed. California and the home state of Chairman, 1%, no harm. Massachusetts, home state of Chairman Markey, 25%, no harm. And it's curious that the districts that aren't harmed are some of the wealthiest districts in the country. Median income of mine is $48,000 based upon the census report, American Community Survey 2007. Mr. Whitfield's is $36,000 a year. Mr. Boyer used $37,000 in his calculations last night. Chairman Waxman, $79,000. Chairman Markey, $68,000 a year. The wealthier districts pay less. What a shock. The poor districts pay more. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves. Many of these poor districts have coal mines, so we're now in a double jeopardy situation for poor rural America. And I want to ensure that more coal mines do not close, especially in response to the FERC chairman's announcement that there will be no more baseload energy created by coal or nuclear power. My amendment is very simple. If because of this act, 2 coal mines close, this Title III would be null and void. Now, we've heard talks about the 90 amendments. My staffer put this up. This is not a paid political advertisement. These are real coal miners who lost their jobs in the 1990 amendments of the Clean Air Act. And I would say to those authors of this amendment that the 90 amendments at least were for toxic emittents. Carbon dioxide is not a toxic emittant. So who paid the price? The people who paid the price were Midwestern states. This mine, one mine, 1,200 jobs closed. And I was at that rally to watch politicians come and say, we're going to save your jobs. And they were the very same politicians who voted for the bill. I swore on that day I would never vote for a bill and then go to these guys and say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to fight to keep your job. Now, my colleagues on the Energy and Air Quality Subcommittee have heard this speech before. The rest of the full committee has not. So that's why I bring it up one last time. You know how many coal miners lost their job in the last Clean Air Act amendments? You all know, I've said it 1,500 times. 14,000. The state of Ohio, you know how many coal miners lost their jobs? And that was testimony in this committee. 35,000 jobs. 35,000 jobs. This isn't going to hurt jobs? You got a simple solution. You got a simple off-ramp. 2 coal mines close, an off-ramp. When we were talking about this bill in the previous Congress with the previous chairman, we talked about industry-wide with off-ramps. But we had a change at the helm. Guess what? No off-ramps. And that's what we've been doing for the past 3 days, is talking about off-ramps to make sure that if electricity prices go high, we have an off-ramp. This amendment says if these guys get screwed in this bill, we're going to have an off-ramp to protect jobs. I don't trust you. I don't trust this bill. This bill will cost jobs. And this is a great insurance policy if you really, really, really believe that your bill will not cost jobs. And with that, I will return the balance of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I withdraw my reservation.
Gentleman's time has expired. The reservation of a point of order has been withdrawn. The chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes, after which we will respond to the vote and come back and vote. So if members want to leave at some point, they can feel free to leave and come, and they will still be able to vote when they return. I just want to point out that coal production in the United States has increased by 15% since 1991. Well, how could that be? And then there had been a loss of jobs in Illinois and the East Coast coal areas. Part of the reason for it is that in 1990, when the Clean Air Act was adopted, the utilities were given the requirement to reduce the sulfur emissions and some of the other pollutants. They could have done that, particularly the sulfur emissions, in one of two ways. They could have put scrubbers on, especially when high sulfur coal was being burned. Or they could have used low sulfur Western coal. Well, the utilities had the choice, and they chose the least costly alternative. They moved much more in the direction of taking low sulfur Western coal than in paying for the scrubbers. Now, a little history lesson. When we were trying to get legislation through in this committee to deal with acid rain, some of us who wanted to deal with that problem and get the pollution reductions to stop the acid rain offered a proposal that would have provided a subsidy to pay for the scrubbers. And the response to that, I thought, was generous offer was, there's no problem such as acid rain, and we're not going to deal with it. Several years later, in 1990, the Congress passed for a law under the Clean Air Act calling for those reductions without any subsidy to help pay for the scrubbers. And the utilities did what was in their economic interests, and jobs have been lost. And I'm sorry that jobs have been lost, but that was sometimes the result of actions or inactions. There are consequences. Well, we now have a proposal before us that this amendment to stop the implementation of the provisions of Title III if there are losses of coal jobs. This bill, I think, will give the power industry the certainty and support they need to build new coal-fired power plants, ensuring the continued use of coal in this country. So if you care about the coal industry, realize that the utilities are waiting to know what the rules are going to be. And if the rules are that they will be able to build new power plants and use coal in the future, it will bring a better future for coal. If this law does not pass, I don't think it's going to be a clear picture of what the situation will be for coal in this country. We've taken strong steps to protect coal mining jobs by providing the support to build a whole new generation of coal-fired power plants with very low emissions of carbon dioxide. We provide regulatory certainty in this law that we're proposing, and this bill would remove one of the key barriers to building these power plants. The bill dedicates 2% of the allowances in the first few years and 5% thereafter to cover the full costs of installing carbon capture and sequestration technology and running it for the first 10 years of operation. So the bill gives coal a path forward. If the gentleman from Illinois who's offering the amendment wants to defeat the bill, I suggest to him that he would be defeating the opportunity for the use of coal in the future. Now, his specific amendment it says that if by virtue of the provisions of this law, that if 2 or more coal mines close, then all the provisions of Title III will be out the window. Well, I hope they don't have to close, but that's going to be a business decision. But if the law, if this bill, overall bill, becomes law, the business decisions that will be made will be to build new power plants, burning coal. Now, that ought to be good news for those from the coal areas and for the environment and for the utilities that want to use coal in the future. So I would urge the rejection of the Shimkus amendment and the adoption of the overall bill that's before us. My time has now expired. The chair would like to declare recess unless we want further debate. Mr. Barton?
I could have 2 minutes.
Gentlemen,
maybe even 1 minute.
I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton, to make further comments before we
Very
recess.
briefly, Mr. Chairman, I support the Shimkus amendment. I just want to read from a news article in the Charleston Gazette, either today or yesterday, talking about the bill and complimenting Congressman Boucher on his efforts to improve the bill. The UMW representative talks about some bonus amendment, some bonus allowances that Mr. Boucher has negotiated that should be worth between should be worth around $181 billion between now and 2050. Then the president of the United Mine Workers, Mr. Roberts, said in a statement, the legislation contains many pro-coal items that his union supports, but that he still has some concerns, quote, about the bill. Phil Smith, a union spokesman, said that the UMW supports what Boucher has done and what he says will be a continuing effort to reduce the overall near-term emissions reduction even further to at least 14%. On Wednesday, the National Mining Association issued a statement repeating its prior opposition to earlier versions of the Waxman-Markey bill. The National Mining Association recognizes changes to the original draft of the legislation are intended to reduce harmful economic consequences of the legislation. These changes, however, are not sufficient to produce a balanced and responsible policy for addressing climate change concerns, said Mining Association President Hal Quinn. And, quote, the result will be a devastating loss of high-paying mining jobs, higher energy costs for businesses, and the exporting of American businesses and jobs to countries that do not require similar greenhouse gas emission reductions, end quote. So, we recognize that efforts are being made to protect the mining industry and the coal industry, but if this legislation becomes law, Mr. Chairman, they're going, according to the National Mining Association, be devastating loss of mining jobs, and I don't see how anybody in this country will build a coal plant when with the carbon capture and sequestration technology not mature. A coal plant's going to emit significantly more CO2 emissions than any other form of baseload generation. They're not going to do it.
The gentleman's time has expired. We're being summoned to the House floor to respond to 2 votes. I know other members may wish to speak on this particular amendment, so I won't close the debate, and we'll come back as soon as we can after the second vote.